The clotting of the blood. Clotting process is important because it prevents the blood loss and prevent the entering of pathogens. Formation of a blood clot. First, plasma, blood cells and platelets flow from a cut vessel. Contact between the platelets and components of the tissue, collagen fibers in the skin, causes the platelets to break open in large numbers. They release several substances. Serotonin causes the smooth muscle of the blood vessel to contract. This narrows the blood vessels, cutting off the blood flow to the damaged area. Thromboplastin is an enzyme that starts a sequence of chemical changes that clot the blood. 1. Thromboplastin catalyzes the conversion of a large soluble protein called prothrombin found in the plasma into another soluble protein, the enzyme called thrombin. 2. Thrombin acts on another soluble plasma protein called fibrinogen, converting it to an insoluble substance called fibrin. The fibrin forms a mesh of fibers to cover the wound. 3. More platelets and red blood cells pouring from the wound gets trapped in the fibrin mesh. This forms a clot. 4. Special proteins in the structure of the platelets contract, making the clot tighter and tougher to form a scab that protects the skin and vessels underneath as they heal. A clot in the vessels that supply the heart muscle with blood can cause a heart attack, and a clot in the brain can cause a stroke. Important: red blood cells have a limited lifespan because they don't have a center membrane nucleus. When a red blood cell travels through the blood vessels, it uses up its energy supply and only survives an average of 120 days. Prothrombin is a protein made by the liver. It is one of several substances known as clotting, coagulation factors. Fibrinogen is a plasma glycoprotein synthesized by the liver and is the major structural component of a clot. Function of fibrinogen is the formation of fibrin that binds together platelets and some plasma proteins. After enzymatic cleavage, prothrombin is converted to the active form thrombin, catalyzing the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin, thus ensuring clot formation. Vitamin K is important in the production of many of the compounds needed for the blood to clot, including prothrombin. Myoglobin is another pigment with an affinity for oxygen, which is higher than either hemoglobin or fetal hemoglobin. Bow effect is the name given to changes in the oxygen dissociation curve of hemoglobin that occur due to a rise in carbon dioxide levels and a reduction of the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. Questions. 1. Explain why fetal hemoglobin needs to have a higher affinity for oxygen than adult hemoglobin. Oxygenated blood from the mother flows through the placenta close to the deoxygenated fetal blood. If the blood of the fetus had the same affinity for oxygen as the blood of the mother, very little oxygen would be transferred. Therefore, fetal hemoglobin has a high affinity for oxygen. 2. How does vitamin K involve blood clotting? Vitamin K helps to make various proteins that are needed for blood clotting. The vitamin K given at birth provides protection against bleeding that could occur because of low levels of this essential vitamin. 3. Describe how oxygen is transported in the blood. The hemoglobin molecules that are in the red blood cells transport oxygen. Each molecule can collect 4 molecules of oxygen in a reversible process to form oxyhemoglobin. When the blood enters the lungs, the concentration of oxygen in the red blood cells is relatively low. Oxygen moves into the red blood cells from the air in the lungs by diffusion. The oxygen is collected and bound to the hemoglobin. The oxygen levels are relatively low in the body tissues. The concentration of oxygen in the cytoplasm of the red blood cells is higher than in the surrounding tissue. As a result, oxygen moves out into the body cells by diffusion down its concentration gradient. The hemoglobin molecules give up some of their oxygen. 4. What are the functions of white blood cells? Their main function is to defend the body against infection. Leukocytes are also very important in the inflammatory response of the body when an area of tissue is damaged. Circulation in the blood vessels. Arteries. Arteries carry blood away from your heart towards the cells of your body. Almost all arteries carry oxygenated blood. Other than the pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. The umbilical artery carries deoxygenated blood from the fetus to the placenta during pregnancy. The arteries leaving the heart branch off in every direction, and the diameter of the lumen, the central space inside the blood vessel, gets smaller the further away it is from the heart. The very smallest branches of the arterial system, furthest from the heart, are the arterioles. Blood is pumped out from the heart in a regular rhythm, about 70 times a minute. Each heartbeat sends a high-pressure flow of blood into the arteries. The major arteries close to the heart must withstand these pressure surges. Their walls contain a lot of elastic fibers, so they can stretch to accommodate the greater volume of blood without being damaged. Between surges, the elastic fibers return to their original length, squeezing the blood to move it along in a continuous flow. The role of the elastic fibers in artery walls is to return to their original length to help maintain the pressure. This is called recoil. The elastic recoil does not help to increase pressure, it simply helps to maintain the pressure. Arteries further away from the heart are known as the peripheral arteries. In the peripheral arteries, the muscle fibers in the vessel walls contract or relax to change the size of the lumen, controlling the blood flow. This controls the amount of blood that flows into an organ, so regulating its activity. Capillaries. Arterioles lead into networks of capillaries. These are very small vessels that spread throughout the tissues of the body. The capillary network links the arterioles and the venules. Capillaries branch between cells. Substances can diffuse between cells and the blood quickly. Their walls are very thin and contain no elastic fibers, smooth muscle or collagen. Digested food molecules and hormones quickly diffuse out of the blood in the capillaries into the nearby body cells, and carbon dioxide and other waste molecules diffuse into the capillaries. Blood entering the capillary network from the arteries is oxygenated. When it leaves, it carries less oxygen and more carbon dioxide. Veins. Veins carry blood back towards the heart. Most veins carry deoxygenated blood, except the pulmonary vein, which carries oxygen-rich blood from the lungs back to the heart for circulation around the body. The umbilical vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the placenta into the fetus during pregnancy. Tiny venules lead from the capillary network, combining into larger and larger vessels going back to the heart. All veins carry blood back to the heart, so they have low pressure and do not need a thick wall. Eventually only two veins, sometimes called the great veins, carry the blood from the body tissues back to the heart, the inferior vena cava from the lower parts of the body, and the superior vena cava from the upper parts of the body. The blood is not pumped back to the heart. It returns to the heart by means of muscle pressure and one-way valves. When the muscles contract, during physical activity they squeeze veins. The valves keep the blood traveling in one direction, and this squeezing helps to return the blood to the heart. There are one-way valves at frequent intervals throughout the venous system. These are called semilunar valves because of their half-moon shape. They develop from infoldings of the inner wall of the vein. Blood can pass through towards the heart. But if it starts to flow backwards, the valves close, preventing any backflow. Notes: veins can hold a large volume of blood. In fact, more than half of the body's blood volume is in the veins at any one time. They act as a blood reservoir. The blood pressure in the veins is relatively low. The pressure surges from the heart are eliminated before the blood reaches the capillary system. This blood at low pressure must be returned to the heart and lungs to be oxygenated again and recirculated. Blood is pumped out from the heart in a regular rhythm, about 70 times a minute. Each heartbeat sends a high-pressure flow of blood into the arteries. The major arteries close to the heart must withstand these pressure surges. Their walls contain a lot of elastic fibers, so they can stretch to accommodate the greater volume of blood without being damaged. Valves in the veins make sure blood only flows in one direction towards the heart. The contraction of large muscles encourages blood flow through the veins. Blood pressure is highest in larger arteries and velocity of blood passing through larger arteries is also high, but they have the minimum total area. While the capillaries have the highest total area and lowest blood flowing velocity. Blood moves more quickly through arteries. The velocity of blood inside the aorta is maximum. Questions. 1. What are the adaptations of capillaries for their function? Because the diameter of each individual capillary is small, the blood travels relatively slowly through them, giving more opportunity for diffusion to occur. The smallest capillary is no wider than a single red blood cell. Their walls are very thin and contain no elastic fibers, smooth muscle or collagen. This helps them fit between individual cells and allows rapid diffusion of substances between the blood and the cells. The walls consist of just one very thin cell. 2. Why are valves important in veins, but unnecessary in arteries? Unlike arteries, veins contain valves that ensure blood flows in only one direction. But arteries don't require valves, because pressure from the heart is so strong that blood is only able to flow in one direction. Valves also help blood travel back to the heart against the force of gravity. 3. Why do arteries have thicker walls than veins? Since the blood pumped from the heart into the arteries flows at higher pressure than the blood in veins, hence arteries need to have thicker walls or else the high blood pressure might cause them to burst. 4. What are the adaptations of arteries for their function? They have thick walls to withstand high pressures, a narrow lumen to maintain high pressures, and a thick layer of elastic fibers to maintain high pressures between pump cycles.